It's all good. I didn't really try, or I hadn't driven the Formula Ford cars before we talked about it originally, and so I started getting into those. And it might also just be with those, like not having a ton of downforce, or
Yeah,
just
or
getting used to
none at all.
different setups. So yeah, gosh, I probably spent one night. I spent like 2 or 3 hours, and I think I completed a quarter of my laps because it was like that. I did Lime Rock, and that first turn there, that's just that incredibly long turn. And every time I would like just get a little bit too far on it and either get in the grass or just push it too hard, and it would oversteer out of the
That's
next
one of
turn,
the
and I'd
toughest
just be
corners
screwed.
in any
Is it
car.
really?
That first corner at Lime Rock is really hard because it's really long, as you know, and it kind of tightens at the end, and it's really unforgiving if you drop a wheel wide, and it's really dirty offline. So if you go slightly wide, it's more slippery anyway, and it never feels like you get it right. It's really, really hard to find the best compromise in that corner. So I definitely feel your pain there. So I've got some notes that I've made. Oh, you can't see them because I'm sharing. I've got two different PCs running here to do this. But,
good.
But anyway, each sim coaching and real coaching driver has their own little tab on a document I'm looking at now, and I make notes as we go along so I can remind myself what we got up to last time. Obviously, we don't have anything at the moment, but I did make a note based on what you said before. Tell me if I'm getting this wrong. You want to beat your cousin, is that right?
Yes.
You've got direct drive running triple screens. But currently, looking at the stats, I think I remember you telling me this. Have you done no official races yet?
That's right. Yeah, because I just knew that I would crash into people, and I did not want to be that guy. Kind of like the equivalent of like I don't want to go out, and I don't know if you're like a golfer or tennis player. Like I don't want to go out there and hit the ball into the crowd every time.
Yeah, I'm not a golfer or a tennis player, but that's what I would do if I was.
100%. So I at least don't want to make everybody else's experience bad. So it's one thing if I'm getting frustrated at it, but
that's incredibly conscientious of you, and most people don't remotely take that attitude. So hopefully you'll be a good iRacing citizen. I can see you've loaded in. Are you in the session now? So
it is. It's just finishing loading up.
Okay, fine. It's connected you to the server at least. That's what it's told me. So that's good.
Yep.
Sorry, I was just going to say what I tend to do in these sessions, unless there's a reason not to. I tend to have these servers running for an hour before and an hour after the session itself. So although it's a 1 hour session, the server's normally up for 3 hours because it doesn't really cost much more to host it for any longer. Really, it's not a massive amount. But what it means is if you ever want to come in and do some practice, first of all, in the exact conditions, I also make the settings static, so the weather shouldn't get hotter or colder or whatever. So if you wanted to come and do any practice laps before we start, you don't have to set your own thing up. You can just jump in and you can be in here, that's fine. But you'd never have to do that, that's just if you want to. It also means I can do that because I find quite useful, although generally I'll try and set some data trace laps prior to the sessions. There will be times where I literally don't have time until just before the session. Like next weekend, for example, I'm working all week this week. I'm doing a completely different weird job. And then when it gets to the weekend, it's full-on sim coaching all through both days. So it helps me. I can just jump in, do an hour or half an hour before. But what it also means is there's a replay file now of me driving this track somewhat on an ideal line with some kind of half-decent lap time that we can refer back to. If once you've done some laps and we want to do some comparisons, we can look at what I did, rather than me having to go on whilst you're driving and then I'm not watching you, which wastes everyone's time. So that's why the session is an hour before, and it goes on an hour after in case anyone's ever delayed or in case we overrun. I almost always overrun because I blab too much. So that's why I build in like a minimum of a 1 hour buffer between sessions, because otherwise my sessions would constantly overlap because I just talk for too long. So anyway,
no, appreciate that. Yeah, I'll make sure that next time. Now that I know that, I'll join in, so you don't have to wait for me to load it up next time.
Oh no, but that's completely fine. Like, most people join on the hour. It's just it helps me to have that buffer anyway. But you're welcome to also use the buffer for yourself. So we also don't normally go through a big checklist to begin with, but I'm going to do it always on the first time, especially when you've got new equipment and stuff. Some of the stuff we'll look at might be completely obvious. but some of it might not. So let's just
Okay.
bring that up to make sure I don't miss anything. So before we get you driving, oh, that's the wrong thing I've clicked. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing is to check that you've got Garage 61 installed, which I think you told me you'd already done.
Yep, I do.
And I think if I was to check the website, I think I'd probably find you in there already. I thought I had that page open. Just bring that up. I'm just going to check. I'm sure I've already seen this, but I'm just going to check in the team.
All good.
Yeah, you're in there, so that's awesome. And when I click on you, I can check and see what you've been up to. So let's just make sure that's all working now. Activity. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I can see that you've done sessions here, and I can see you're in this one as well, which is awesome. Okay, so that's cool. Next thing then. In the past, I had to check that you had the data logger running, but it just runs in the background. So if you haven't changed anything, well, we know it's running because I can see that you're in the session now, so that's fine.
You can see I'm in. Yep.
Next thing then is graphic settings. So I can't obviously see your screen. So did you say we're talking on Discord on a different machine to the machine you're driving on?
Nope, same machine.
Same machine.
It's just a different screen. Yep.
Are you able to do a screen share just so I can see some of your options in iRacing right now?
Let me see. Yeah.
It's reasonably straightforward in Discord.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, just trying to find my.
We don't have to
screen
do this
now.
every time. This is just the first.
No, all good. Yep. All right. It's still trying to find screen. All right. There we go. Okay.
And I'm sharing. I mean, you don't have to do this, but I'm sharing my screen in 1440p. So, if you do need to expand it, if we're talking about stuff, you should be able to read, speed figures and all that kind of thing. It should be crisp enough you can see. Right, I can look at your stream. Here we go. Okay, awesome. So I know I said graphic settings, but actually what I meant was driver settings in the options. So if you just close the graphic, that's it. Perfect. Okay, so this is exactly what I wanted to see, and you're also sharing in a nice high resolution. So the things that I want to change, we're not going to change them in the very first run. I just wanted to see what settings you had, but we will probably change one. There's only one thing. There's only one thing I want to change, and we'll do it after the first run. But at the moment, you see you've got in the driver's view neck motion at 100%. It's the second from
I
bottom.
do see that.
So
yep, this one. Okay.
Essentially what that does is if you imagine when you're riding like a mountain bike or a horse and you're going over bumps.
Experience.
Sorry, say that again?
No, I was just joking. I said, yep, a lot of experience with those.
Okay, cool. Okay, perfect. You know when like you're not sitting on the saddle, you're keeping your butt off the seat and you're kind of bending your knees and letting the vehicle or the horse come up and down to you. So you stay in like a static plane, but the thing underneath you is moving up and down, and your knees are acting as like suspension. Neck motion at 100% is effectively doing that same thing in iRacing. So on the screen, your car will be moving up and down relative to you in real life. So your real world cockpit that you're sitting in that you can touch and feel right now, that obviously isn't moving around as you go over bumps and curbs and elevation change. But your on-screen cockpit currently will be moving up and down, even if you haven't noticed it yet because you've probably not seen it in any other way yet. But what we want to do, and what all like the pro sim drivers will do, and if you went and drove on a F1 simulator at a factory, that doesn't happen. Like the on-screen cockpit is locked to the actual cockpit that you're sitting in because you want the world to move around you and you want to have a consistent idea of where your vehicle is. And make sure it's not kind of moving relative to you, just like if you were sitting in it in real life. So we will change that after the first run, but I want you to just bear that in mind now on the first run. You might now notice it, and then when we turn it off, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's the only thing, though. Everything else, I think you've got basically the same as me. Your shift horizon. Tell you what, we'll leave that as well for the moment. That's just the angle that you're looking at. That doesn't really make a huge difference. That's not the thing moving. That's just the way the camera's angled. Field of view and driver height, we can leave those. Driver height's kind of preference. I've got mine maxed out pretty much, because the higher you sit, the more you can kind of see around the front of the car, but it's completely up to you. You can change that on the fly. Yeah, that's fine.
I was gonna say.
Roll chassis and pitch chassis, they do a similar thing to what we were just talking about with the car moving up and down, except they do it side to side. They kind of act as a gyro, but weirdly, the graph, or the chart here, like the little bar graph thing, is the wrong way around. So you'd think no movement would be 0%, but actually no movement is 100%. So I don't know why that is, but you've got them on the correct setting anyway, so that's all fine. Okay. So we don't need to change anything else there. Right, whilst we're on this screen though, there are a couple of other things I want you to do. I'll just bring up my checklist. Okay, so next thing, pedal pressure check. So I can see you've currently got a little bit of brake on, where you're probably resting your foot on the brake pedal. If you bring your foot fully off the brake pedal, is it still showing some? Is it still showing some on?
Yeah, it's just got that little bit there at the bottom.
Okay, so your brakes are kind of binding at the moment, like the pads are rubbing on the disc. So we probably want to recalibrate that. So just do me a favor and go through the pedal calibration system. But the thing to change is, when it says fully release it, so same with the throttle, when it says fully release it, don't fully release it. So keep a tiny little bit of throttle, in this instance, on. So just like you're resting your foot on the pedal, so you see a little tiny bit of green at the bottom, just like that. And whilst you've got that tiny bit of green, that's when to click done, if that makes sense. And that means, and we're going to do that on the throttle and the brake. So that just means you're building in a bit of a dead zone, so you won't be mistakenly pressing the brake or the gas. It's most important on the brake, because most people kind of leave their foot resting on the brake pedal. So just make sure when you click done, there's a little tiny bit of brake still on, and then you won't be doing it by mistake at any point.
Got it. Okay.
Cool. That's fine. Okay. And then once you've got that all done, now press the brake as if you were braking into a tight corner from a long straight. I'm just basically watching how the red bar moves.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I don't remember what pedals you've got. Are they load?
I've got they're load cell. They're the Simjack Pros.
Yeah.
They're like
cool.
the knockoff of
the knockoff Hoechst things. I think they look really good, and I think that's an option that I would buy if my pedals ever died. So that's cool. Okay, I'll get your feedback on those. So that looks fine. The only thing I'd say is I can't see your foot moving, obviously, and I don't know how hard the pedal feels. But just make sure if you've got any adjustment on that pedal, like physical adjustment, just make sure it's not squishy. It probably sounds obvious, but you just don't want it to be. You shouldn't be able to apply maximum brake pressure with your toes, for example. You should have to actually put some force behind the pedal to get it to maximum. I have to use I'm quite an extreme example, but I have to use my whole thigh to really push hard. I mean, I don't know if you can see my screen share, but to get to maximum brakes, that's like I've got to press like He-Man to get it. You don't have to go that extreme, but you also don't want it to be too far the other way, so it's like the gas pedal. So just bear that in mind. And
cool. And I've got a couple of springs that I can adjust to make it stiffer. I've got it with a little bit softer one right now, but I still have to use, a good amount of muscle in my calf. I'm just not like, I don't have to use my full, like I'm trying to squat or something.
Yeah, that's fine. That's completely fine. You just don't want it to be too easy, basically. We need to be able to feel a certain amount of pressure it takes to slow down, in a certain situation, and be able to consistently replicate that without having to try and judge the distance you're moving your foot. And obviously, the softer the spring, or the easier it is to push the brake, the more you rely on working out where your foot is in like space. How far it's traveled. Whereas the firmer the pedal is, the harder it is to push. The more you're relying on remembering the amount of pressure you've applied to get the brake to operate at that level. But anyway, and apparently, this is my experience too, but apparently people are better at judging and replicating pressure that they're applying with a limb than they are accurately assessing where they've put their limb. So if we blindfolded you and said, hit this level of pressure, watch the red bar, make it go to 50%, and then I blindfolded you and said, right, now do it again. And if one was with a firm pedal and one was with a really floppy pedal, people tend to be better at finding it with the firm pedal. That's it. That's the reasoning. I'll shut up about that now. Right, next, steering degrees check. This is going to sound so dumb and like obvious, but just turn your steering wheel 90 degrees to the left for me. Okay, cool. That's fine. That is good. I know that's really obvious, and you can see on your screen whether or not that's calibrated, but I have had people where they've done that and the wheel has spun around a couple of times, so... but yours is clearly calibrated absolutely fine, so that's good.
So, question for you.
Go for it.
Because when I did the steering wheel calibration, it said, like, range of motion is less than expected. Is that an issue, or...? That's
interesting. I've never seen it say that. It says you've got 360 degrees of map range. I've got 900 effectively on mine. But in a single-seater, and most cars, you're never going 360 degrees on the wheel anyway. You're going, you're using kind of the maybe 180 degrees maximum of steering most of the time. So provided your real-life steering wheel that you're holding onto and that virtual one in the calibration screen are matching up and doing the same amount of steering, then that's all I care about, really. So if it's doing that and... no matter where you put that virtual wheel, your real wheel is at that same angle, then you've got it set up absolutely fine. So,
perfect.
And if we were doing like drifting and it needed to spin round a couple of times, then obviously you want it to go 900 degrees or something, but you don't need that. So that's all good. We're nearly done. This is more just a question for you. Are you happy with the steering weight? So I know you don't have a massive amount of experience, but does it feel like you're getting information from the weight of the wheel, i.e. when you turn into a corner and you turn the steering wheel further and further and there's grip loading up on the front tyres, do you feel the wheel getting heavier? And conversely, when the rear slides, do you feel the wheel suddenly being pulled out of your hands in the opposite direction to tell you that you're getting oversteer?
A little bit. It's not strong right now. I've kind of just like started a little bit lower to start out, but I know there's room to go up on it. Just trying not to hurt myself while I'm crashing all the time. So still trying to figure that one out. But I think ideally I'd like to turn it up a little bit when I get more comfortable with my skill set, so that I can get a better feel for it. But right now it's okay. It can be better.
And just remind me what wheelbase you've got there.
I've got the SimMagic FX Pro.
Yeah, okay, cool. Again, there's so many, it's impossible to be familiar with all of them. I know that's a decent wheelbase, and it's probably capable of quite a lot of power, but that's fine, though. I can see it says 10 Newton meters. These things in this force feedback settings section don't always tie up with reality. And what I mean is, for example, with mine, when I turn the force feedback up in-game, the number gets smaller in terms of Newton meters and vice versa. I've got no idea why it's inverted, but you can't necessarily read into that. But as long as you've got it at a level where it feels okay for the moment and you know how to increase the weight, we'll just assume that the other settings are in the SimMagic software are probably pretty much roughly okay for the moment. Sorry, go on.
So quick question for you. On the strength versus intensity, what's the difference between those two?
So intensity is a new option that I've never seen before until this conversation. So
all right.
I've only ever gone from so wheel force is supposed to be the maximum that your wheel can actually give you.
And that's right.
So that's set correctly. And I then just go with, you see, you've got strength. If you click on the word strength, like it doesn't look like it's clickable, but literally just click on the word strength, and that should change to max force. There you go. So that Newton meters figure is the one that is opposite for me. So I don't really know how that relates on yours, but you can see I've got mine at 42. If that was down at 30, that would be really quite heavy for me. It might be the same for you. I don't know. Let's see. I wonder whether if I go. No, I'm not gonna touch it because I've got mine set nicely. I'm just gonna leave it alone. But basically, you can do it on the fly. You can do it when you're sitting in the car with the black box. So if you ignore this screen completely, And when we sit in the car, we can open the black box for the mirror controls, and underneath that, one of them is force feedback, and you can literally just use your mouse or use a shortcut on the steering wheel or whatever to turn up and down the force feedback strength there, and you can see whether it's physically heavier in your hands or not, even when you're stationary. So you can, and I'm constantly adjusting mine when I go between different cars. Like when I jumped in this car, suddenly it was way too strong because I'd obviously been driving a different car that I needed to pump it up for. I know you can have you can set it individually per car, but I just tend to tweak it each time. So when I drive out of the pits, I get to the first corner and think, oh, that's a little bit too strong, and I click it down a couple or click it up a couple on the in-game options. So if I just don't save this, I'll show you what I'm talking about. You've probably seen this already, but it's this black box here, graphics adjustments, and down the bottom is force feedback. So, for example, that is heavier for me. Generally, the right-hand one, when you click on the right, it makes it heavier. You click it left, it makes it lighter, regardless of what the figure actually says.
Okay. So how did you, and again, because I've got newish equipment, so I've got a bunch of buttons that I can press on mine too. How did you, and we don't have to talk about it now, but
no, it's fine.
It'd be great to know how to configure those so that I can have things like that. Because the only one that I've pre-configured really on there is just the reset to the pits, which it's gotten a lot of use.
Yep, everyone's does. So the way you do it is you go to options and control, and then you've got a bunch of options in here of basically anything in here you can assign. So I've even got like this ignition and starter. I've got a physical ignition switch and starter button on my dashboard here. Tear off visor is quite useful in single seaters because you get a dirty visor.
So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm in options, and then how do I get to those controls?
Oh, sorry, bottom, on the very bottom. This is one of the screens that's actually going to change soon. But for the moment, down the bottom right where it's got control. The tab,
control, that one. I got you. Okay.
There you go, and you've got loads of things. You can literally assign all of them.
Okay. Got it. Okay, so that's where I changed those. Perfect.
Yeah, and the one we were just talking about in terms of the black box controls, that's the one that you need for the force feedback up and down. You would go down to select next control, select previous control, increment and decrement. Those are basically up, down, left, right. That's like an arrow. Up, that moves your little button selection. So if I close this and go back into the car, I'll show you what I mean. So on this graphics adjustments one here, if I go, I've got buttons to go down and up and down. You can change things like that. So if you could see any of that basically. So it's just like a direction pad. And that's those controls. There's even a toggle switch, so you can make these things movable. So I have a toggle on my steering wheel, so I can move them to somewhere else. And literally everything on your screen you can move to a better place if you want it somewhere different. But I'll leave you to do that when you fancy it.
Yeah, right, I'll do that another time. Okay.
So we will change those kind of view options in a little bit, but the first thing I want you to do is, we're finally going to do some driving. I want you to just go out of the pit and just drive 5 laps and try and pretend I'm not here. You're welcome to talk to me, so you don't have to ignore me, but I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and watch you. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you that I'm recording the session right now. I record all the sessions. Perfect. I upload them to a private YouTube link, and I'll send you the link once the session's finished. But it's only you that will have the link. But just so you know it's recording, and you'll see everything I'm looking at. And apart from if I look in the air, I'm looking at your stream, but I don't need to do that in this session. So, but yeah, just go out and drive 5 laps. I'm going to keep quiet. I'm going to watch you from various angles. And don't worry if the laps aren't amazing, or if you crash, just reset to the pits and go again. And afterwards, we'll change a couple of options and just talk about some basics and go from there.
All right, sounds good. I am, just because it looks like my frame rate's not great right now, so I'm just going to turn off my camera and see if that improves it.
Yep,
that's okay with you.
Yep, no worries.
Okay. And actually, you know what? Let me just try. Do you mind if I just call this back from, I guess, how important is it for me to be able to see your screen on my thing, or is it more the audio? So I was just wondering if I call back from the mobile app just to kind of try to save again a little bit of
It's only important
Or-
when we're reviewing things and I'm showing you things, you know. So once you've done some laps and I'm showing you your driving from different angles, I'll be like manipulating the replay and stuff. So then you will need to see my screen, but you don't need to see it whilst you're driving, obviously.
Okay. Yeah. Let me. Well, no, because I actually, now that I think about it, I can't have race audio and this going at the same time. Okay. So let me get on in there and I will get started.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and anything you need to do to make it easier for yourself to do the driving. Obviously, everyone's setup's different. So, do you need a more powerful graphics card or something? Is that the next thing on the?
Yeah, I think that's it because it's inconsistent. It does not like 3 monitors currently.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Huh. Where's the audio on? Okay, so I'm gonna ask a dumb question here.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Seems like the audio just wants to go off of Discord and not off of iRacing.
Okay.
Is there?
So.
You had that before or no? Because normally I've got my headphones in, I can hear everything.
So if we just go in your iRacing options and just go to sound,
Yep.
and just make sure that your headphones are still selected. So just on the options and then sound tab, there's this device. Sometimes that gets changed when headphones get unplugged and plugged back in. So I've got mine on. It says speakers.
Do you do? Okay, because I've got X Audio 2 or Direct Sound.
I use Direct Sound. I don't think it makes any difference, to be honest. I think if I select speakers on X Audio 2 or speakers on, I've got so many audio things here. It normally works on either, but I use Direct Sound.
Okay, cool.
See if that makes any difference.
Yep. Now I can hear it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sometimes when audio devices get unplugged and plugged back in, iRacing just defaults to a different thing. So I get webcams trying to be microphones and TV screens trying to be headphones all the time. So
Okay.
Right,
Perfect.
I'll shut up. I'm
Alrighty.
going to watch you.
All good. That was fun.
Yeah, so one thing, I know I said I was going to keep quiet, but since you're reversing,
No,
I
all good.
can talk to you.
Yep.
With this car, one thing I've noticed, because I've got a few guys doing this same car, the tyres do take maybe 4 laps before they're at their optimal temperature. They should be drivable on lap 1, but not particularly grippy. And then they get better and better and better as the laps go on until about lap 4, where they hit their optimum and then stay about the same.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I will also say I'm not familiar with this track, so...
Okay, no problem. Is this your first ever lap of this track?
I tried a couple, and I've got frustrated and spun, so I went to Lime Rock and
Okay,
stuck
no
with
worries.
that.
Okay, that's fine.
So I might just do one really slow lap around first.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what then, I'll talk to you whilst you're doing your slow lap, just to tell you what's coming up. So this is effectively a large hairpin that opens up on the exit onto a very, very long straight. So the reason I say a large hairpin rather than just a hairpin is because it's not that tight, but you arrive at the corner from quite a high speed, so it feels tight. You've now got this really long straight into a typical hairpin, so a 180-degree corner that's very slow and tight. This is going to be a first gear corner, basically. A couple of the corners are first gear. And there's actually several hairpins on this track that are similar in profile to this one. So if you get one of them right, you can kind of do the same technique on each of them. The next corner coming up is a 90-degree left, followed by another 90-degree left. There's a bit of elevation change, so it's tricky because it goes downhill and then uphill, but we'll talk about that in more detail as we go on. After this 90-degree left, there are 2 180-degree hairpins. One goes left, then one goes right. They're both very slow, they're both first gear, and they come in quite quick succession. But they're just basically the typical hairpin shape that you draw on a piece of paper. And then you're nearly at the end of the lap, so it's actually quite a simple track. So you now got 2 pretty much 90-degree right-handers. The first one is quite open. It's not actually quite 90. The second one's slightly more. and this is the final corner on the lap. So that's the layout. This was used for the 1994 Pacific Grand Prix, if you'll believe that. Formula One cars raced here. This was called the Pacific Grand Prix. Yeah, basically that was the name of it. But yeah, now it's Okayama. So turn 1, kind of a long-ish, 90-ish degree corner. And then turn 2 is a fast, open, long left-hander. And then I'll keep quiet and just let you learn for a couple of laps. This section, though, I know I said I was going to keep quiet. This is just full throttle. So this S-bend here is just easily flat out. It's just effectively a straight. You did well not to floor the gas when you went off there.
Actually, how do I adjust audio settings really quickly? Just because your audio is a little too quiet on here, and mine is too loud on the race.
Yep, no problem. So you want my voice louder?
Yes.
Okay, so in Discord, if you right-click on my name in the coaching voice channel...
Yep.
There should... where is it? Yeah, there should be like a user volume bar that you can drag up that'll make that... I'm always adjusting you guys, because it's different for every person. And if you wanted the game audio louder or quieter, you can change that. I've got that also as a preset dial on my steering wheel. You can change that in your options. But
okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's all right. No, there's no stupid questions. Like, iRacing is really complicated and not particularly obvious until you've done it a bunch of times. And there's tons of options that it took me ages to find.
It's a little more complicated than just throwing, game of the Xbox or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Once you've got it set right, though, it's all good. You won't have to change much. So.
Okay.
The reason I'm not spoon feeding you how to drive each corner and what's coming up is I'm trying to watch how you're learning the track and how you're approaching corners that you don't know yet. So.
Yeah.
We will go into a lot more detail once you've done a few laps.
Perfect.
You might want a fresh car. That might be a bit bent.
Yes. Might not be ideal.
I can turn off damage when I set the session up. I tend to not, because there are some situations where we need to know if doing a certain thing will damage the car. Okay, so you just did a thing. This is great. That was a really good example.
Go over the white line.
Exactly. Yeah. So you will probably get a black flag from that. Don't worry, because I can remove that black flag for you. But ordinarily, just stay to the side of the white line, basically on the exit of the pits.
Okay.
There you go. I've cleared your penalties.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I usually do that just because I'm driving in a practice session by myself and I don't care. But real life, that would be a problem.
I've seen real world drivers do that, even though they should know better, when I've been coaching them. And they didn't even know it was illegal. They just thought it was like good etiquette. And I was like, no, if someone sees you doing that, you're going to get a big penalty.
Yes. that one. It's the other problem with spinning too much and having to correct things is I forget the turns because I only get halfway through the lap.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's one of the reasons we use this track initially, because it's not too long. It's not super short, but it's also, you will be getting to the same part of the track again quite soon, so it should start making sense reasonably soon.
Okay.
So you're nearly at the end of the lap. This is the last corner.
Okay.
This car is not easy either, by the way. This is a tricky car, but we'll get used to it. So this is already way better. So already you're kind of getting a bit more used to not going way too quick into a corner if you're not sure what's coming up. This is looking good.
It's not a good line.
So I know it's annoying that you went off there, but that's we're going to use that in a minute when we look back at these laps, because there's a really, really good point we can make from exactly what you did there. So I'm going to put a pin in that, and I'll come back to that when we finish this run. So 2 more corners to go on this lap. We'll complete this lap, do 1 more flying lap, so we'll get 1 more timed lap done.
Okay.
And then we'll pause for a moment. So this next lap, we'll get this one done, and then we'll go back to the pits.
Okay, perfect.
That was an improvement through there.
Yeah. And I didn't spin there either, so alright.
And you got
that's the one I spin in.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything. you did get further through the turn though before the spin happened, so
alright. Making progress.
I'm gonna still take that as a win. And and that was just a bit too brave. But to be honest, that actually wasn't a bad entry speed. It's just because the line wasn't ideal and the tyres aren't super hot, etc. But that wasn't a crazy attempt. We're just not quite at the level yet where you can hang on to that. That's all. Cool. Okay, so you've got that lap on the board. I think that was actually still your best of the session. I know we're not looking at lap times just yet, but
my 2-minute lap was my best lap,
despite a couple of spins. So okay, so you can exit the car. That's it. Back in the pit lane. That just then makes the data upload. So if you just jump out of the car, so you're back in like the kind of replay screen, and just make sure you can see my screen. I know it's annoying to have to flip between Discord and iRacing.
All good. All right, let me just bump you over to the main screen here. The big screen. All right, I can see you.
So the first thing to say is, obviously, it would be completely unfair to like start going over the lap and say, okay, you need to put the car here, and we need to make this apex and yada yada. We're not quite at that point yet. We're going to just talk about some overall general things before I want you to be super comfortable with what corner's coming next for a start before we start getting a bit too detailed.
Yeah.
But
I will say it's also okay to roast me. Don't worry about the criticism. No, go for it.
I try not to make these sessions roasts as best I can. So what I'm going to do is, can you see this now? You see we're riding on board with you.
Yep.
Going down the main straight. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to zap through the lap, just reminding you what corners are what. But there's one corner in particular, the one where we went straight on in the gravel a couple of times, that highlighted a potential trait that we want to just stamp out early, because it'll help you with all of the rest of your real and sim driving on track life. So let's actually forget the first few corners. I'm just going to nip through. So you've got this 90-degree right, you've got this pretty open left-hander, and we've got this flat-out S-bend into the what I was calling the large hairpin, because it is kind of 180 degrees, but it takes a long time. It's not an instant 180 degrees. It's like over a long period, and it opens out here. As you can see, it's kind of tight here, but then when you get to this point, it gets more and more open until it's on the straight, and then it opens out fully. And at the end of this straight, you've got that typical 180 degree, completely tight, slow hairpin, which you probably remember.
Take that too tight.
Now the next corner, this is what I noticed, and to your credit, on the following lap you didn't do this, but on this lap and the previous one, I'm just gonna run it in full speed and then we'll go back. So you started turning here. You started slowing down and turning about here. So this is when I can hear your revs drop, and that made me question, where were you looking? Like what were you looking at this point? Because if we were to rewind and like leave this corner, all the way back here, it's pretty clear there's a left-hand corner coming up, and it's tight enough that it kind of disappears over here somewhere. But it was like you got to the corner, and then it suddenly surprised you that, oh shit, there's a corner. Like, and it was only really here that you're like, over there is a corner, and you realise. Yeah. So that's a really normal thing. So this is what I say. I'm not trying to roast you.
No, just all good.
So what that highlights is, at this stage in your race driving development, you might, especially learning this new track, and this is where it's most important to not be doing this, you might have been looking a bit close to the front of the car, like looking at the ground somewhere, or, I don't know, looking at a phone or something.
Honestly, I think what happened here is, instead of like just focusing on what's in front of me on the screen, I'm trying to think through and remember all this. So my brain is probably just trying to think through like where are these turns here, and not actually realizing that there is a turn right there in front of me, and just seeing, okay, I know there's a turn, but which way am I going? When does it actually come? And so like while I'm thinking through it, my brain all of a sudden realizes I get to that turn. I'm like, oh shit, I need to turn left here, and it's too late. So it's a late reaction instead of just taking what's in front of me.
Yeah, and so you would probably never do that on the road. You know, if you were driving, there's probably roads you drive all the time that you've never seen before. You know, if you go to a new place and you're driving on a country road or whatever. I don't know what it's like in the US, but we have a lot of those here where we're going somewhere new. You have no idea what comes next, but you never get to a corner and fall off the side of the road because you're kind of reading what's coming up, and you're using markers that you see, hedges, you know, just literally the shape of the tarmac in front of you, or other roadside furniture to give you an idea of to help your driving brain calculate roughly what speed can I get away with in this turn? How much do I need to brake? What gear? You won't know it exactly until you've done it a couple of times, but at least like a rough approximation. And what we want to get to ideally, when we've done a bunch of sessions and and you're up to speed, is we should be able to go to a brand new track and tyre temperature aside, because obviously it is slippery on the first lap, you should be able to go out and even on the very first lap, before you've ever driven the track before, roughly drive it in a pretty good approximation of what will eventually be the ideal line and speed. Obviously, you're going to fine-tune it and get way better, but we should be able to read what's coming up. So I want to teach you how to do that, like how to read the roadside furniture. So the first thing, you already said it, is to not overload yourself with irrelevant stuff, like not actually think about too many things. You're probably thinking, I'm going to need to change gear in a moment. How much do I need to turn the steering wheel? How hard do I need to press the brakes? All this other stuff. So we want to simplify that right down to just the essentials, which is like letting that happen a bit more automatically and just look as far in front as possible. So I hate saying this because this is like a race driver, coach and race instructor cliche. People are always saying, number one thing is look ahead, look as far into the distance as possible. And people charge horrible amounts of money to put eye trackers. I've seen it on simulators and in real life, like eye tracking systems to prove to the driver, look, you were looking down at the road here, you should have been looking up ahead. I'm not going to say it's that extreme, but it is important just to try and look far in front. Obviously, the graphics aren't as good as they are in real life, but you can still see pretty much what's coming up. And basically, the first thing, just try and calculate how tight the corner looks, essentially. And if you don't know for sure how tight it is, just be more pessimistic. Like, treat it like it's slower than it is on the first run. Also, one basic thing you can do without having to know much about this corner, as long as you can see which direction it goes, you can give yourself the best possible chance of making it easily by being totally on the opposite side of the track. So, for example, we know this is left-hander, so you're doing the right thing by being over here somewhere on the right, but you can get all the way. I can still hear your throttle. You're wide open at this point. I know you can't hear it because you're watching my replay, but it's like, whap, up until this point. So you can be as far across as possible. You were actually doing quite a good job of that. This is actually fine. So that's something that is a good thing. You're already placing the car quite well. So the main thing for us here is, if you're not certain what's coming up, just brake a bit earlier. And I know that sounds really, really obvious, but just try and give your driving brain as much time to calculate what angle and speed you can get away with as possible. Slow down a little earlier, and just really try and take in what's in front of you there. Again, I know this sounds super surface level and really like obvious, but it's on this lap, of course, it obviously wasn't. Don't worry too much about the gears, because the gears are very, very simple in this car. So that's another thing I'm going to come on to. At the moment, you're changing up through the gears a bit like you probably would on a road car. So if I just go back to the previous straight, this is harder because you can't hear it, but I'm going to tell you when you're changing. So you just changed gear there. That was a decent point. You can't hear it, but I can hear the revs are nearly at the maximum of where they need to be, so no problem here. The revs are kind of quite low. And there we did an extra gear change that you didn't need. So you've now given yourself an additional task at the next corner. You're going to have to come down one more gear because we've gone up an extra one we didn't need. So this is another one of those simplifying kind of tasks. We only ever want to go up a gear when you have to go up a gear, if that makes sense. Unless you're fuel saving, which we're obviously not doing. Until the car is screaming at you and the revs can't increase anymore, don't click the paddle, basically.
Okay.
Having said that, there are exceptions, because we might want to short shift to prevent wheel spin, but let's park that for the moment. Just as a general rule, only go up a gear when the car is effectively forcing you. And in this car, you can probably see, you can't see it on this view, but because I'm up too high. Let's see if I can just lower the camera a little bit.
It's okay.
There's shift lights on the
Yep.
dashboard. So when they get to the end or they're flashing, basically, I tend to get to the end and wait a fraction because the revs are actually still increasing slightly. But that's when to go up. So that will give you one less thing to worry about. We're going to let the car tell you when you need to change. But like I said, this track, there's not that many gear changes. So in the next run, I'm going to actually tell you what we should be in. If you're not naturally coming to the right conclusion, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why that is and how you can know that next time. Because the downshifts are the heart of it. It's easy. I've just told you a rule of knowing when to upshift, but knowing how many gears to go down is much more complicated because the car isn't going to only tell you. You're going to have to choose how many to go down, and that's going to be based on what speed you need to carry in the middle of that corner, how much grip you've got, what line you're taking. So it's a bit more complicated there. So that's why I will just tell you that to begin with until you're able to work it out perfectly. But you're still doing it decent. You know, you've got a rough approximation here, absolutely fine. You're not arriving at the corner here completely bogged down or anything like that. So this sounds absolutely fine. You can't hear it, but I can hear the revs sound fine.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from going straight on here, let's just skip past that. The next one was this hairpin up here that we had a few spins at. So I'm just going to watch exactly why. Okay, so I can tell already why you're going to spin here. You're just going in way more bravely than I was. You're just not quite aware of how tight the corner is and how slow you need to be going. You've just come through a couple of more open corners, and you come to this one, and I'll look at what I was doing in terms of speed, but you arrive, say, here at this, roughly where this curb is, at 100k. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can already feel, just by watching this, I can feel we're not going to make it at this speed. So it's just a tighter corner than you realised. There's no way of you knowing that. Like, from this view, if you've never driven that turn before, that could be a 90-degree left, for all you know, because it's hidden behind the barrier here. So that's why I say, until you know for certain, assume it's tighter than it is. And then build up. It's always more frustrating, and you just get pissed off at yourself and at the track and everything if you have a few spins, because it's harder to like build up from there. If we went in a bit slow, you can always creep the speed up and not get pissed off with it, basically.
Okay, because I was gonna ask, like, your preference in trying to learn these things. Is it better to like go past the limit and then rein yourself in, or in this case, because I keep spinning out, it's better to kind of edge myself toward the limit?
I definitely think the latter. Definitely the latter.
Okay.
And in real life, 100% the latter. You definitely can't afford to go too far. Exactly. But even in the sim world, you'll waste less time if you do it the second way. If you're constantly spinning, you've effectively learned nothing other than I went in too fast, or I went on the wrong line or whatever. You can't like bank that lap and then look at your delta and try and go faster, because you're not actually getting a delta. It's effectively won't count, this one. That's another question I have for you. Do you have your lap time delta showing on the screen anywhere when you're driving?
Yeah, I think it pops up right in the middle of the screen.
Okay, cool.
Like,
and is
top middle?
Is that versus your best lap? There's a number of options. You know, you can choose whether it's against the optimal lap or against the best lap. If you haven't changed it, it's probably against the best, which is fine.
Yeah, I haven't touched it. So
okay, that's fine.
So it's the best. I do have that on my wheel as well, though, if it's not showing up there.
Okay, cool. I'd say for the moment, leave it as against your best, because it will only compare it against the best if it was a legal best. So best only ever counts if you haven't done an off-track or a spin or whatever. And that means that will, first of all, tempt you to make sure you're always clean and trying not to pick up any off-tracks and stuff. But you also know it's a realistic lap that you definitely did. Whereas if it's against optimal, there's a good reason to do it against optimal when you're up to speed and you're trying to eke every last hundredth of a second out of the lap. But you didn't actually do that lap. That was just taking your best sectors. So to begin with, it's probably best to compare against the best. Right, anyway, so the simple thing here is we just didn't brake hard enough. You just assumed the corner was a bit more open than it was. And because the engine's behind you, you got to this point, and because you're slowing, at this point you are trying to slow down. You're probably touching the brakes slightly. Weight is on the nose. Engine wants to keep going because it's behind you, and it just brings you around. So that's pretty straightforward, simple one, and that's basically what you did each time. So that's no drama. The only thing you need to do differently is to treat the corner as if it's slower, because it is slower than that. And we'll talk about the exact lines and stuff later on. But for the moment, we'll just talk about judging speed. And then final corner. This is all really good. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Aside from not letting the car run all the way wide, which will obviously give you more leeway to carry more speed, and it means your wheels are straighter. One of your aims. This is a good thing to keep in mind. I know I said I don't want you to be overloaded with things to think about all the time, but just as a general thing to be aware of, one of your main jobs as a real or virtual race driver is to try and always have as little steering lock on as you can for a given situation. So there's a minimum amount of lock that you could take through this corner that will allow you to stay on the track. If you use less than that, you'd end up driving on the gravel on the exit, and if you use more than you need, you end up exiting the corner somewhere in the middle of the track like we have here. So you know straight away that with less steering angle, you would have ended up wider, but that's fine because there's still track over there. And the less steering angle you've got at any given time, the higher speed the car can cope with. You know, and basically there's a direct correlation between how much steering you've got on and how slow you need to be going to be able to grip with that much steering lock on. So just always have that in mind. And on this one, you know that you exit that corner. Okay, I could have got away with less steering. Next time, I won't keep that angle on. It's obviously not a completely static thing. You don't always get to a corner, turn a set amount, keep it there until you leave the corner, and then bam to straight, like you're playing on a PlayStation controller, where you can only click on or off. But as a general rule, although there are kind of grey areas at the entry and the exit of the corner, in a constant radius corner like that, where it doesn't tighten or get more open, in the middle phase at least, you are kind of using a set amount of lock, and then you're releasing it on the exit. So just bear that in mind. Just remember to release it. That's all. So that's it, right? So that's really it for like a basic first lap assessment. And I totally appreciate if I left you for half an hour to keep going round and round, you'd have done it way, way better than that without me saying a word.
Sure.
But I want you to be able to fast track everywhere we go to. I want you to be able to figure it out quicker straight away. And you having a few basic things just to bear in mind, like only changing up a gear when you actually have to change up a gear. That's instantly going to simplify the downshift calculation. Even though, like I said, I've not given you a method yet to know how many gears to go down, you at least have fewer gears to have to calculate from that one. Making sure you're really looking ahead at what's coming next will give you longer, your subconscious driving brain that's calculating what you can get away with, it'll give it longer to process what you can get away with and what line you need to be on and what speed you need to be carrying. And that final thing, just bearing in mind you always want to be using the least lock possible, will give you a starting point. If you exit a corner and you run wide onto the grass, you might then think, oh, actually, I needed more lock for that corner. And if you try more lock and you still go off on the grass, you can then think, okay, maybe I was going too quick for that amount of lock, so I'll just do the same but go slower. So now before we do any more driving, and we will do another run, normally on these sessions, by the way, we do quite a lot more driving. I've just done a ton of talking today because it's the first one, and we did a bit of setup at the start. But before we do the next run, let's change your options to make your head not bob around. So if we go back to the options screen and then down to the neck motion, let's knock that down to 0% and go again. And I'm hoping I've caught you at a stage in your iRacing experience level that you're not so ingrained at being used to the car bouncing up and down on the screen in front of you that this feels weird. Because sometimes when I tell people to do this, first or second run, they're like, wow, this looks weird. Just because you're used to the visuals of the car doing a different thing, that's all. The car will now no longer compensate for bumps for you. So you are now fixed to your virtual car. If the car goes over a bump, it's like you are also going over a bump. So, or an elevation change. Cool, right, so let's now run that again. I'll try and talk less, except on the first lap, I'll just be a bit of a co-pilot, remind you what's coming next, and then I will shut up unless you talk to me, basically.
No, all good. I will just add one thing to this, and again, I don't know how important it is, or maybe it's a down the road thing, but as far as actually figuring out the racing line or
Yep.
where the apex of turns are. Like, I don't really know. I just kind of go off feel on it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, that's. I love that you care enough that you've asked that question, because clearly knowing how to work out what the ideal line is a big deal, and some people have never thought about it. They just kind of get enough experience that they figure it out, and they manage to, without actually having consciously tried to work out why they know how, they just figure out. But I think it's good to have both. I think it's good to be able to be experienced enough and have done enough laps that you come to a good conclusion, but also know why you've done that. We will come to that, but I want you to be able to just get around the track, even if we're not on the perfect line, just get around comfortably, consistently, lap after lap. So we've got like a baseline that we can then go, right, now, when I tell you to change a thing, you're going to be able to consistently change it. And so, but we will 100% do that, so don't worry.
Okay. All right, cool. I'm going to turn
as
my
long as you
camera
know,
off.
as long as you know, in the middle of the corner, generally you want to be close to the inside, and on the entry and the exit, you generally want to be close to the outside. So you're going outside, inside, outside, as a general rule, pretty much everywhere. And that will give you a good starting point for finding an apex.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Alrighty,
Let's go.
I'm going to go camera off, and we can go back around.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so turn 1 is a long 90-ish degree corner, so pretty slow, pretty long, also nice and wide. Turn 2 is a more open, slightly higher speed, long left-hander with very little runoff on the exit. The next corner is a flat-out left, so although you can't really see, we know that this corner is just full throttle, this little S-bend. But the next corner is that large hairpin I was talking about that's tight at the beginning and then opens up. Nicely held. You've now got the long, long straight, so super, super long. And at the end of this long straight is a really, really slow hairpin. You've not really had many problems with this one, so maybe the fact that you know it's so tight at the end of this long straight has been helping. But yeah, it's a first gear, really slow hairpin. You're going to keep it out of the wall.
I had no problems with it.
That's fine. Basically, I can just tell you, I don't like just saying do this differently or brake now or whatever. But just as a helping hand for that one, I could just see you didn't press the brake particularly hard. That's all. So just put a bit more pressure into the brakes. That's all. Cool. So 90 left followed by this next 90 left. And then you've got the two hairpins, the first of which, this one, is the one you've had a few spins at. So really slow 180 degree corners. And then to finish the lap, nearly 90 degree right, that's pretty fast. And then a nearly 90 degree right again, which is still pretty fast, but you arrive there quicker, so you have to actually slow down slightly. And you're going to keep it out of the wall, so that's fine. Car's good. So the reason that one's tougher is because, although it's a similar angle to the previous one, you've had time to get up more speed by the time you get there, so you just have to slow it down a little bit, that's all. Right, I'm going to shut up, leave you to drive a couple of laps. I'm sure we're going to go quicker than before. But just look in the distance of what's coming up and don't be too optimistic about the speed you can carry. So that lap was awesome by comparison to anything else you've done today. So really, really decent effort.
Cool. Thank you.
It's okay, you kept it out of the wall, so car's all good. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Your mid-corner speed in the hairpin there was all fine. You just were a little bit too optimistic on how early you could get back on the gas. That was all.
Okay.
You just ran out of track because you were quite early on the power. Nice effort through there. That's good. That will be broken though. That's all right. No problem.
Yes.
I've seen enough from those laps that we can pause for a moment. I want you to be able to do tons of laps, but I also want to.
Yep.
I also want to not go too far before we talk about things. And yeah. So the lap. Let's look at your. Let's look at your good lap there. The one that was a 153. Because you did some really. You did some really good stuff on that one. So although you're still really not familiar with this track at all, you judged what was coming very well. You basically deliberately underdrove, you got round totally safely, and immediately obviously found tons of lap time because you didn't spin, and on the previous best you had spun. But even without that, I'd still say that was a better attempt. So although I don't need to look back at that whole lap, I'm just going to like zoom through it and just show you a couple of things. So I don't know quite why we're on the grass on the exit of turn 1, but that's probably it's quite easily solved.
I was going to say, I think I was just going a little bit slower than I thought, and I just oversteered into the grass.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure, because I can't feel the weight of your steering wheel, it's very difficult without flying over to you and just having a feel of what information your wheel's giving you. It's difficult to know this for sure. But it looks, from the way the car's moving on some of the straights and some of the early turn-ins into some of the corners, it looks like the initial steering is very light. Am I just imagining that? Is the steering giving you weight around the center? So if you're driving on a straight and you gently, you tried to move the steering wheel with your fingertips, would it be resisting you? It's not like kind of loosely flopping around in the middle or anything.
I think it should be.
Okay.
I mean, I'd have to think about it going through or pay attention to it, but I think I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay, fine. Essentially, what we want it to feel like.
But I can turn it up if I need to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more concerned about the weight being correct, as in the right direction. Because I've seen sometimes where the steering feel does the opposite of what it actually should be doing. And because someone's gotten used to it like that, they just never questioned it. So effectively, if you were to drive in a straight line and turn slightly to one side, the wheel would be pulling more and more across on its own. It would be like as a side, as opposed to what it should feel like, which is a bit like real life. If you're driving down a freeway and you turn left gently and you let go of the wheel will go straight again because it's trying to force itself straight all the time. And the more angle you try and apply, the more it resists you, and the more it tells you like your grip is weighting up, and then you let go and poof, the wheel will go straight. As long as it's doing that thing, it doesn't actually matter really how heavy or light it is. It's just that it's doing it in the right direction. That's all I care about. But it might just be that you're very strong, and it might just be that you're, any kind of light wandering on a straight might just be indecisiveness. That it might purely be that. So, I just wanted to.
I think it's that.
Yeah, cool. That's fine. So, okay, so around the next corner here, really, really good speed judgment. So, yeah, okay, we didn't use all of the track on the entry. Well, we used almost all of it. We went miles from the white line or the grass, so that's pretty good. We didn't get all the way to the apex, but you at least went towards it and judged the speed well. This was great. And you got on the gas hard on the exit. Okay, we didn't go all the way wide either here, but again, at the speed you were travelling, you actually didn't need to. So partly that's a good thing. Partly it's still circuit unfamiliarity and you're just trying to stay away from the edges, but that's fine.
Yep.
This is all good. This is one of the toughest corners, and you did well. Again, we're not all the way at the edge, so I'm not criticising now. I'm just saying this because I'll go over this more and more and more as we do more sessions and more laps. I'll be a bit more firm with the exact positioning of the car, but you're on the right side of the track, which is great. You've slowed it down sufficiently. You've got tight at the apex. That is pretty much exactly where the apex is here. And you've got on the gas hard as you see the track opening up in front of you. So that's all really cool. This is fine. The really tight hairpin at the end of the straight. You're starting all the way to the one side, which is perfect. Oh, also, I noticed you weren't just going up extra gears for no reason. It doesn't sound like you're full throttle a lot of the time. It sounds like you're kind of nearly full throttle on the straights. Like the revs, but we'll look at the data in a minute just to prove or disprove it. But we know the pedal's calibrated.
Right.
Because I watched you calibrate it. So, but we'll look at that briefly in a moment. Really good. I mean, that is the apex. It's a long apex around this corner because it's such a long, slow corner. You do stay on the inside most of the way around, so this is good. The only difference was, at this point, well before we could see out of the corner, you started to get on the power quite hard, and we end up understeering wide because of it. But not the end of the world. You realised you didn't go to full throttle, everything was fine, and you made the corner fine, so that was all good. This one, where we traditionally had a bit of problems, you are obviously extra cautious because we've been off there before. But you clearly were looking through the corner a lot more. Like you were looking over here rather than over here somewhere, which is good. Next one. Sorry, I'm listening to your engine revs because I can hear what speed we're doing. Again, a really good approximation. We didn't remotely go wide on the exit. We had all this space to use. So it's still a good habit to know that we're aiming to go from here to roughly here to over here. And the circuit furniture, and by that I mean like the stuff around you at the side of the track, to use to kind of prompt you to go to those places are the curbs. So generally if there's a curb there, it's because that's where people go. So you should probably be there. At least at some point on that, you should be there. But you judge the speed absolutely fine. Then our hairpin that we had a few spins on. Really nice. And I can actually hear now, I can hear the revs drop. Whereas before you were still doing 100k plus here. You're now down to 66 on the little speed here. So clearly a difference. And I can hear your revs go, burr. And obviously the faster that pitch drops, I know the harder you're braking. So it's much clearer. Before it was like, it was like there wasn't any braking sound from the engine, and now the speed drops away quickly. Great. Very, very good. And it feels slow and horrible, but it's a really slow corner, so it's supposed to feel slow and horrible. So that's fine. Accuracy is better, and that's good. So really, really nice. And then again, there's a right-hander. You get over to the left, all good. And again, you're nice and slow at the apex here. A bit like earlier on in the first of the hairpins, the one at the end of the long straight, you got to the middle here and started to get a bit too brave and started to get on the gas, and that obviously pushes you wide. So going forward, if we were to do more and more laps at this track, we might do more here. It is a good learning track, but you would want to wait a bit longer. Even if you don't come fully off the throttle, you just want to wait until you're a bit further round, until you can see that you're going to make the exit before you increase the throttle. Here you just got on it a bit early,
Okay.
but we got
Yeah,
to the
so
we got to
can
the
we-
edge. Yeah.
Sorry, can we jump back like
Course.
5-10 seconds in that? Because I think this will help a little bit with setting something like that up. So in a situation like this where we've got basically double hairpin,
Yep.
I know you said, right, like far edge of the track, come out of the turn, far edge of the other.
Outside,
Do we-
inside,
or-
outside.
Yeah. Do we still want to do that in this case because it is such a tight double hairpin on that? Or is
Yep.
that one where you're not going to go all the way back to the outside coming into that second one because it's going to cost you more time to get out there?
Yeah, so the simple answer is, like, just the telling you how to drive answer is, yes, in this situation, you're completely right. The best compromise is to not go all the way wide on the exit of this corner, because there's more benefit to be gained by getting a good entry and exit to the following corner. And the reason for that is because after this corner, there's a very, very short straight, as we know. It's between the two hairpins. There's only a very short straight. So getting the ideal, fastest possible exit here has a limited benefit. Whereas getting the ideal exit to the next corner has a much longer benefit because there's a long straight followed by a couple of fast corners. So anything you gain by doing the next corner well is going to be a bigger gain than doing this one well. Coupled to that, doing this one well makes you do the next one worse. So it's like a double whammy. It not only is there less point doing this one well, it also negatively affects the next one. Having said all, so that's just giving you the answer. The way you figure that out is obviously not as obvious, and you'd have no way of knowing that until you know what comes next, which is why the very, very first lap of a track is never going to be the perfect thing. But by the time I'd done one lap of this track, and I know, or by the time, that's unfair, by the time I know what corner's coming next, or pretty much what shape the corner's coming next, subconsciously, your driving brain, when you're experienced enough, would come to that conclusion purely because you'd kind of feel, you'd go through here, so say you exited this corner and you ended up all the way wide, so even wider than you were now, which is what you'd do if this was just now a straight that went on for ages. So if there was no corner here and this just went straight ahead for 500 meters, you definitely would go all the way wide here. But because you can see, there's a corner coming up here, you'd exit this corner wide, you wouldn't quite be able to get over to the left in time. You'd have to then slow down extra for this corner, and it would just feel slower than it needs to be. And then you just, on the next lap, you'd shift your compromise. If you remembered what was coming next, you should, I say automatically, but it's not necessarily automatically. This is the phase of learning where there is a bit of conscious thought coming into it. You would try compromising the exit here, which means just holding off on the gas a bit longer, letting it rotate a bit further round before you get on the gas, and then driving, so you exit somewhere maybe half a car width less wide than you've gone here, which means you can get pretty much all the way to the left for the next one. You see, you just didn't have time. There was no way you could have got across because your compromise was slightly more weighted to exiting the corner well. That's a that's a track familiarity thing at this point, largely. But you're completely right to ask that question, because the correct line for a corner is never in that corner in isolation. It's you have to take into account what came before and what comes after, and that is then how you come to the right conclusion. And so you can tell if you were all the way left at this point, entering this corner, you could have entered at a higher speed, and you could have then probably done a better exit as well. So I'm now, before we kind of wrap up, I would be more than happy to carry on this for another half an hour, because I know I take a bit of time doing the setup at the start, provided you weren't busy. But I actually have to, it's Sunday, obviously it's Sunday in both of our countries, but the shops close quite soon today.
Oh, that's
and
right.
I have to go and buy some clothes for the job that starts tomorrow, because I bought the wrong size. So
yeah, what is it? Everything closed at 3 or 4 on Sunday. I can't remember.
It depends. It's normally 4. Yeah, it's normally 4.
Okay.
So I've got like an hour and a half or so. But the shops are close by. I just that's why I can't go too long. But I'm just going to show you. I'm just going to go on board with mine. Let's go. The last lap I did here. And the reason I'm going to go on board with this car here is because before we finish, I want to just point out where I am looking at any given point and why I'm looking there. I'm just going to do one lap. I'll pause at different points and just tell you where I'm not telling my eyes to look in these places. But the more, it's good to bear this in mind, and the more we do, the more laps you do, the more sessions you do of different tracks, you will automatically start looking in these places. I just want you to know why. And this is the same for any like experienced driver. So right now, heading down to turn 1, I'm looking basically as far ahead as possible, but roughly where I think I'm going to be turning in. So I've already gauged that there's a right-hander coming up. I already know the track, obviously, so I don't have to think what corner's coming up. I know exactly what corner's coming up. But I'm looking at a turn-in point somewhere down here. It's too far away to see it accurately, but it's somewhere down there. And as I approach it, around about this point here, I've already started looking over to the inside of this corner here. I'm tracking the turn-in point with my peripheral vision, but I'm going to go into slow-mo. But at this point, I'm actually looking over here. I'm going to flick my vision back briefly to here to make sure I'm on course for the turning point, which is where we're clearly at now because I'm starting to wander in. And the moment I've peeled off the outside, I'm now firmly looking at where I want to apex, which might well be out of sight. It might be round the corner, but I'm looking as close as I can. If it's behind the barrier, I'm looking at the edge of the barrier. But for this corner, I've decided it's somewhere here. So that's where I'm headed now. As I exit this corner, if I'm going to go in slow-mo again, I'm not looking over at the exit curb. I'm looking to my next turning point. I'm just using the peripheral vision to judge how far from the edge I am. But I'm looking over here at this point, over to the next turning point, to make sure that because I can see the track moving relative to my car over to the left and back to the right or vice versa, depending how the car's moving across the track. And I know I want to go over there, and so I want to make sure I've got time to get across there. So I know we've finished our rotation, looking over here, and then as I know I'm headed towards that, so at the point you know I'm on target for that turning point, that's when you have a brief flick across and look into the next corner before turning back to here just to accurately get it. And then the moment you've made your turn, again, you're looking at the apex, and just before you hit the apex, you're looking out towards where the car's going to go. In this case, it's the exit curve over here. So basically,
and I noticed.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I noticed too, it looked like you just tapped the brakes a little bit through there instead of just lifting.
Yeah, so I'm carrying quite a lot of speed in at this point, and you can see there's a lot of modulation going on here. So if we were to do like a slow-mo, I'm trailing the brakes a bit, a little bit of gas just to bring the speed up to the maximum I can get away with. I'm now sensing the car's understeered a little bit, but I've got room to go. So I've basically made the judgment that so I can give a little bit of gas here. I'm working out, is it sliding wide? Is it going wide? Now I know it's sliding wide, but I also know I've got enough room to get to that curb at full throttle without running out of space. That's just from having done it a bunch of times. I probably did it much worse than that on the previous laps. But on this one, I made the judgment, turns out to be the correct one, and I've got just enough space to go out there. So now I'm just looking straight as far ahead as possible. I know it's a full throttle corner, so I don't have to think about this whatsoever. I'm purely looking for my turning point down here. And generally, as you've probably noticed so far, you look at where you want to go until you know you're definitely going to get there, and then you look at the next place you want to go. So I'm looking at my turning point. The moment I know I'm definitely going to get there and I can monitor that with my peripheral vision, I'm looking now over here. Just because I look over to the right doesn't mean I immediately turn right, which is a potential danger. I'm looking right, keeping the steering straight, and then when I sense I've reached that turning point, then my hands follow in towards the next part, so which happens to be here. And I know I'm about to hit this apex, so immediately I'm looking round the corner to where I'm going next, and I'm using that as well, because just because you're not focusing on the edges doesn't mean you can't roughly tell the position of the car. I can still tell, am I on the right or on the left, even though I'm looking far ahead. And again, so I'll blast down the straight, just literally looking for the turning point, which is far. Now at this point, I actually do use a bit of a brake marker. Normally I try and feel where the best place to brake is, based on how fast I'm going and how tight I think the corner is. This one I'm kind of using this 100-meter board, because it's quite featureless down this straight. There's not a lot happening. There's only these boards really to look at that give you any meaningful idea of exactly how close to the corner you are. So I was using this 100, and you can see I'm just getting on the brakes just before I arrive at the 100 board. So as it disappears from view, that's when I'm braking. But I'm still looking kind of down at where I want to turn in. Now I've already started looking over here, and I'm just trying to get as close to the apex here as possible. And I know I want to go this way, so I'm not bothering looking over here anywhere. And this, you know how I wasn't roasting you, but I was saying we can use all the exit. Turns out, I didn't even realise this, because I don't think about it when I'm doing it. I've judged the best compromise, exactly like in the other double hairpin we were talking about. The best compromise is actually don't go that far, stay tighter for longer. provided you can get on the gas hard. So the only difference I'd say is when we ran wide, you'd picked up some mid-corner understeer. I've stayed tight and slow enough for long enough that I can get to full throttle right here with 0 understeer. And that's purely that's purely because I've been so slow and tight in the middle. But that's exactly one of those cases you were just talking about earlier, where it's better to not travel further and give yourself extra distance and more problem to get back across. So again, I'm already looking. So you remember before we got all the way over here somewhere, kind of before we looked in, which you're not doing now, which is good. But at this point, I'm already turning in because I can see, I can almost visualize like a diagonal line here, here, here. I can see how these dots would join up from this bit of grass to that curb to that exit curb. I can just picture where I want it to go. I'm just going to make it happen by looking across, looking through the corner on that line that I want the car to do. Same here, you just can't see the exit. It helps that there was some elevation change back there, but exactly the same. I want to join the dots, outside, inside, outside, because there's no compromise decision to make here, because it's so long until the next corner, and the corner goes the same direction as the one I just did, so of course I want to stay on the outside. So that's the other thing to bear in mind. It's only when you've got a change of direction that you need to worry about that concept we were talking about. Sorry, this is taking ages. Sorry, it's because I keep...
No, you're fine.
So long. And same again, I'm not looking at the turning point anymore. We're well past that. I'm just looking round the corner, keeping an eye on this apex. I know I'm going to make it, so now I'm looking on the exit. Let's see what conclusion I came to here from the corner you were just talking about earlier. So it is a case of middle. So
like middle, okay.
So if I tried to go so tight I exited here, I'd have to wait on the throttle too long. But by going here, I get to have my cake and eat it. The way I know that this is the right balance between not going too far and not being too tight is I can get on the power as early as possible, which is from here, I'm at full throttle, and I can still get all the way to the left. Oh, actually, not all the way across. I didn't go all the way across. I think that's because this is such a long, tight corner that there's limited benefit, or more of a limited benefit, to doing the maximally perfect entry. If the corner was 90 degrees rather than 180 degrees, there'll be more benefit to using more track. Because ultimately, we get to the inside here and have to wait a little bit on the throttle anyway, there's a slightly more advanced compromise coming in. But it would have not been a terrible thing to use a bit more track either. It probably would have been negligible. And then, sorry, we're nearly at the end.
No, all good. I appreciate it. This is helpful.
This, not because it's roughly 90 degree, exactly like the previous ones, I'm looking through because I can see where I want to end up. I'm going outside, inside, outside, literally like drawing a line. This is a bit of insider circuit knowledge. I know on this track you can take the piss a little bit and cut the corner without getting an off track. So I've effectively widened. You can go up to this yellow pit entry line and you don't get any kind of penalty. So I've just given myself almost an extra car width of track to use, which means an extra or a few fewer degrees of steering lock I need to use to make the same corner, which therefore means a couple of miles per hour more you can carry. So they obviously will feed into themselves. And obviously all the track on the exit. Last one, exactly the same again. I'm looking for a turn-in point. As soon as I know I'm going to make it, the peripheral vision takes care of that. I'm looking at the apex. So it's kind of like here I'm already looking across and then follow with the hands and bring it across. And definitely using all the track on the exit, because if I didn't, I'd have to, instead of getting to full throttle here, where I'm able to get to full throttle because I can see I'm going to go over there. If I tried to force it to stay where you forced it to stay out here, I just physically couldn't have given it that much gas. So it's just a case of just kind of figuring out what you can get away with, what you need to do that. All of the stuff I just spoke about there, I do not expect you to just go and do that straight away. I just want to keep reminding you what like the gold standard is that we're aiming to get to. And then we've got like a comparison. Each time, if you get closer to doing it, something like that, then we know you've gone in the right direction. That is a tick in the box. I just wanted to show you how it should look.
Okay. Cool.
Right, if we have more time... Sorry, go on.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, like, I know you've got to run. Couple quick questions for you. So you said that
I do love the question. I actually love
this, so I'll be able to go back.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that'll be helpful to go back and be able to reference this as well. I know you also mentioned trail braking. I know the term. I don't really know it in practice, so not a now thing, but just a down the road thing to learn how to actually properly do that.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, for sure. We have to. Like, you won't be able to. You'll be slow forever unless you do that. But you also won't be thinking about it when we do it. But we'll talk about it and why you do it, and so you know what's going on as you're doing it. But just very, very briefly, it means if you were to do the racing school basic advice, which is always brake in a straight line and then come off the brakes to turn into the corner, you can do that. But the moment people are good at doing that and are basically competent, we then would always say, remember that stuff about only braking in a straight line? Forget that, because it will make you slow. So just as an example, this corner is a good one. If you watch my braking trace, I know it's not a trace, just watch my brake pedal in slow-mo down here. I'm doing my heavy braking in a straight line, but I don't come off the brakes as I start turning in. I just start reducing the brakes. Ignore the throttle. That's me blipping the throttle for the downshifts. I've still got some brake on now because I want the weight to be on the nose still, and the speed is still coming down. At this point, there's no brake because I've trailed the brakes up to the inside. There was a little tiny extra little bit of brake there. That's because I obviously judged in a split second that I was still going slightly too quick for the ideal line, so I just gave it a little tweak more. But really, trail braking is here to here, just keeping a bit of weight on the nose. So it means that means you can extend the straight effectively. If you had to slow down to your minimum speed before you turned in, you'd have to be going this slow here basically. So by trail braking, by extending the braking zone, not only are you putting more weight on the front axle, so giving yourself more grip for this phase of the corner, but you're also meaning that the braking zone itself is shifted down the track however many meters, which means you can stay on the gas longer on the straight. So, but what you can't do is go maximum braking like you can in a straight line whilst the wheels are turned. So you have to blend it a lot more. You have to do the heavy braking whilst the wheels are turned, and then imagine as you're turning the wheel, you've got like a piece of string attached to the steering wheel and the brake pedal, and as you turn the wheel, you're having to bleed off the brake pedal. And by the time you get to like 90 degrees, or we can just choose an arbitrary figure, by the time you get to lots of lock, there's now no brake.
Okay.
So that's kind of, it's a similar thing with the throttle. When you're getting on the gas on the exits of the corners, it's the same piece of string. You know, you can't give it full gas until the steering wheel's straight, and anywhere in between straight and maximum, there's an amount of throttle the string lets you use, and it only lets you put your foot down as the wheel straightens up effectively. Those kind of blending concepts, they're obviously more advanced, but we'll be doing that loads. It's like fun. It's actually fundamental once you're past the basic stuff. So it's good that you're aware of it. But yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome.
If I have any questions for you, need to contact you outside of this, what's the best way? Send a message through here, WhatsApp, email, what's best for you? I know you said you've got a lot going on this week.
Yeah, so. No, basically anything. So I look at WhatsApp all the time. So if you want an immediate response or want me to definitely see it straight away, WhatsApp. I look at Discord basically purely for the coaching. So I will be looking in Discord for stuff. I'll also post your link to your video in Discord. And I tend to I use Discord as like the professional content. But I actually don't care. It's more for you guys. I don't want to bug you on like personal numbers and stuff. So I use Discord because if you want to look, you can come and look. Also, I need to ask you a question. I need to just check our bookings. Because I believe the next one, or one of the next one, I'm just looking through the calendar here. Okay, so Sunday, February 25th, so that's next Sunday, right, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Same time, that's all fine, that's all good.
Okay.
As long as it's okay with you, just let me know if it's not.
Yep.
The next one, though, I've got you down at 3 p.m. UK time, Saturday, 2nd of March, which... Yeah,
so... That one I won't be able to do. I've had something come up, so I'm going to be out of town that weekend as well. So,
okay, that is as good in a way, because I was going to let you know, I don't know if you know about this or if you even care, but that is literally exactly when the first Formula One race of the season starts.
yes, that was the other part. So
I've had a couple of other people who had sessions booked in and around that race that realised it was on a Saturday and have moved them. So is there a time that you'd like... I can reschedule it literally now whilst we're on this call, so we know it's done. We can also just cancel it, and you can tell me later on if you want. It's whatever you want, but I'm just looking.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we just... I was going to say the Sunday mornings this time usually work out pretty good. So I don't know if... I don't know what the next one is that I have, but we could just like skip that week and pick back up the week after.
Okay, so let's look at when that would be. So we've got... So next Sunday at 1. Then it was going to be a Saturday at 3. So that's the one we're going to move. So we'll move that to... So you've already got Sunday 17th of March. So let's do Sunday 24th of March. So I'll just move it to them.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, if something else comes up, or if we need to do a different day, can always move it. But yeah, that works for now.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And yeah, apologies for blabbing so much and not doing a lot of driving.
No,
because of
got a lot to learn.
I want you to do stuff right from the start and know what we're aiming for and start on the right foot. And the fact that you're not even doing iRacing official races yet shows me you also want to do stuff the right way. So,
yes.
But awesome. Thank you very much.
Well,
Don't be
so
afraid
much,
to send me any questions either. I like the questions. So.
Okay, awesome. Really appreciate it. This was really helpful. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Cool. I'll send you the link to the video when it's uploaded.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Brad. You have a good Sunday.
Thanks, man. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.